Hi there, I'm Rex King, and welcome back to From the Archive. After Patton came out, George C. Scott had pretty much cemented his legacy and basically had permission to pick whatever project he wanted. So he decided he wanted a Bogart-esque picture and decided to pick up the Alan Sharp script for The Last Run. The first director for The Last Run was going to be John Boorman, the guy who would go on to direct Excalibur. However, he didn't like the script and couldn't get along with George C. Scott, so he dropped out of production. Scott turned into the director who actually made Bogart a household name, John Huston, in the hopes of making a Bogart-esque picture that could also be something he could sink his teeth into. Huston also felt like the script didn't work. So much so that he brought in his son and collaborator Gladys Hill to basically rework the script. This did not work for George C. Scott. So much so they had a very loud verbal confrontation about it, and Huston left the production, bringing on the third and final director, Richard Fleischer. Complicating the picture more was the casting of Tina Amant, which nobody on set really felt like was a good decision, and Scott said she couldn't even act. Now, obviously, that's not true because she went on to have a career after this, but whatever. So they decided to replace her with Trish Von Devere. I apologize if I mispronounced that name, and well, that kind of set things in motion as she became, well, George C. Scott's next wife after Colleen Dewhurst and him broke up. Fun fact, Colleen Dewhurst is also in this movie. So, the film was miraculously made and released on July 7th, 1971, and was a colossal failure from everything I was able to find out. Critics didn't like it, and audiences didn't flock to it. It apparently did not make much money, if any money at all. I couldn't find exact numbers, but that's what most reports I found said about the film. Is this film truly worthy of being lost to history? Or is there something here that could really be examined and is a good follow-up to George C. Scott's biggest hit in Patton? Well, let's talk about it. So, The Last Run, for those of you who don't know, follows a former driver, played by George C. Scott, who's been in retirement for a long time. By driver, I mean he was like a getaway driver and driver for criminals. However, after 9 years of retirement, he decides to come out of said retirement so he could see if he can still do it. So he takes a job which is helping an escaped convict played by Tony Mostante. I apologize again if I mispronounced that name. And they pretty much go on this road trip to help this guy get across the border. Along the way, they pick up Tony Mostante's character's wife, played by Trish Von Devere. I apologize again. And it's what it transpires from there is it's not long before Tony Mostante's character is double crossed, and it's up to these unlikely trio to find a way out of their situation. So this has all the makings of a classic Bogart story, and I can definitely see why George C. Scott thought it might work. You have a criminal who really isn't a bad guy, but really likes what he does, which is driving. Whether it's as just driving through the Italian landscape that he finds himself in, or just driving criminals across the border. He likes doing this, and at the end of the day, just wants to prove he still's got it. But the problem in this film comes from the rest of the characters and, well, the lack of a cohesive, interesting story. The rest of the characters, other than George C. Scott's character, aren't really developed. Tony Mostante's character is a, well, psychopath for the most part, and Trish Van Deville's character, well, she has very little development and is just the girl character to be tossed between our two male leads. At the end of the day, she's not given much to work with, let's put it that way. In fact, none of the actors are really given a good script to work with. With the exception of Scott, I feel like Scott had a lot of good lines and a lot of memorable moments to let him shine as an actor. Too bad that story's paced pretty poorly. There's a lot of downtime in this film that just goes nowhere, especially in the beginning, right up until we get to the point where Tony Masante's character meets up with Scott. There really isn't a whole lot going on, and not a whole lot we could have needed in the film. We could have cut it down even more than what it's already been, and this film's only 90 minutes long. It did feel like a slog at times. However, there are some good moments in this film, like the chase scene towards the end of the film, where George C. Scott and the trio are driving away from these Jaguar cars, and he has to evade them. That car chase is actually really well shot for the time, and I really felt like it was a good car chase. However, the actual climax of the movie doesn't live up to the hype of that car chase, and honestly just kind of fizzles for the rest of the film. Kind of a shame, really. The music is also really good, but I mean, come on, it's Goldsmith. Like, Jerry Goldsmith is one of the best composers who've ever lived. So yeah, of course his score is going to be good. Too bad the rest of the film isn't as good as that score. At the end of the day, the last run is just kind of a disappointment. It's nowhere near as good as it could have been if it had any measure of cohesion, had good pacing, and if the climax was actually interesting. What we have is just kind of a mess of some partially realized ideas. At the end of the day, I recommend this one to anyone who's a George C. Scott fan. Other than that, there's not a lot here. I did enjoy myself at times, but it wasn't enough for me to say that this film is a must-watch. Furthermore, I couldn't find this on streaming anywhere, so I can't even say you should stream it. The only way you can get it is to buy it on DVD, and I think there might be a Blu-ray version. I don't know, but yeah. So the only way to do it is to buy this DVD, and I can't even recommend doing that because, well, there aren't any special features. So yeah. Anyway, that's my opinion on The Last Run. What do you think about it if you've seen it? Please let me know in the comments below. And next week, we'll be taking a look at Genocidal Organ. See you then.